Hello, students. Good morning, all.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Okay, quite a good number. So, I'm Shashikumar, head of the department. Probably you are hearing your favorite teachers' classes, right? Yashaswini Madam and Sandeep sir. But last class I did the circuit switching, the
Sir.
switching networks. So I came up to the datagram. Further, I didn't continue. So I'm continuing for those particular portions also, and whatever in the module 4, the remaining portion to fill up the time, I'll just go ahead. Okay, all right, I'll continue. So in the last class, I'll just go back what we did. The switching networks we studied, where the switching is used for the data transfer. In that, we saw the categories under switching is circuit switching, packet switching, and message switching. So circuit switching, why it came as a first category in that switching networks was when the data transfer came into existence, that the computer came into existence, the data transfer was the need of the hour. Already there was an existing, they wanted to transfer the data from one system to another system, from one place to another place where the systems were remotely placed, but they had to be connected. But how to connect? They cannot lay down the new network. So there was already existing network, right? Which they were using for telephone since almost 60s and 50s. So they thought of using the same network. So that's why the same circuit switching network they retained, right? But a little modification, since it is a data network, as a relay or the switch from one end to the other end, they use the switches, right? The network remains same, they use the switches for switching the connectivity from one end to the other end. That's what we saw. So what we saw in the circuit switching network was the connection need to be established in the beginning between the source to the destination. Once the connection is now established for the data to be transferred, means the resources to be connected. Once the resources are connected, the data transfer is to start. And how the data transfer start is, the whole data is to transfer as a single packet, right? That's what probably in the last class I just showed you. In the switching, the data transfers like a single slot, the complete one pack of data. If your data is 1 GB or 1 MB or whatever it is, it will go as a single pack. Means from the starting bit till the ending bit, the connection remains same. But the overhead over this particular network is the 3 handshakes are required here. One is for connection establishment, and the second one is connection OK by the destination, and the last one, after the last bit is transferred, the teardown, right? That's what we saw. But it suffered some disadvantages, the delay. Then it was not that efficient. So then they moved over to the packet switching. In the packet switching, we saw what is called as datagrams, right? So in the datagram, the whole message is to be split into smaller packets, and each packet is to have a header, and the data is to move in the network. But each packet follows the different paths, right? Means depending upon wherever the link is available as a free, right? From source to the destination, whenever it moves in the network, if it comes to one switch, it will look at its outer connectivity. If that particular link is free, it is to deliver the packet on the next hop, right? Each packet follows the different path, but all the packets finally reaches the destination, and we have solved one problem also, right? Different packets, even though at the source side the packets are delivered in the order, but depending on the route they choose, route they follow, each one will arrive at different times. So out of order, they arrive at the destination, but at the destination, the transport layer and the application layer knows how to order them back in the order and put it to the user. The advantage of this particular datagram was it is fast, right? So, and the efficiency is much better, even though it suffers a disadvantage that there may be a packet loss, but that is minimal when you compare to that speed in which the data is transferred and the efficiency in which the time in which the data arrives at the receiving node, right? And in continuation to that particular packet switching network, we have got one more network that is being used in the data transfer is what is the virtual circuit network. You need to study only the virtual circuit network because the message switching is not there because it is outdated. So nobody uses the message switching. So the extended part of the packet switching network is another one, the virtual circuit network. And you look at here, the virtual circuit network will be a mix of, it takes all the two better properties of both the circuit switching network and datagram network. Means that almost behaves like a data circuit switch network, but it works like a data network in the sense, thus it takes the property of circuit switch network in the sense, here also similar to your circuit switch network, the connection need to be established between the source and the destination. But the pattern and the order or the methodology it uses is little different. You will see that later. And it adopts the features of the datagram, means the whole message you have seen in the circuit switch network, the whole message file, if it is 1 MB, the whole 1 MB is transferred once the connection is established between the source and the destination, right? But here, what happens is the data similar to the datagram is divided into smaller packets and the packets will move, right? That means it is an amalgamation of both circuit switch network and datagram where according to the circuit switch network, the connection need to be established between the source and the destination. And as per the datagram, the data message from the source will not be sent as a single packet. It will be now divided into smaller packets and delivered, right? How it works, right? That's what, let us see here. There are 5 basic properties of this virtual circuit that network is given, right? Here, it also have to utilize the setup and take down phases as you have seen in the case of the circuit switch network. Then the resources has to be allotted until the last packet travels to the destination. And similar to the data network, we need to have the data to be packetized and each packet need to carry the address, right? Similar to your datagram, because the packets has to travel. How it travel, let us see later. In the case of your datagram, it was using the network address. Datagram normally operates in the network layer, but this operates in the data link layer, right? So this is one such example that I take here. The same, the network is there. There are the end systems and they are being interconnected using the several switches, right? So whenever a data moves from the source to the destination, let us take this as a source and this as a destination. The message now is divided into smaller packets, right? When it has to travel here independently in the network, it needs to have an address, right? So in the virtual circuit network also, we need to have 2 addresses. One is the global address and there is the local address. So what is the global address is? The global address is in the sense the packet is moving across the network. It has to pass through several switches or it may have to pass through several networks. Even then, it should reach the destination. When it has to reach the destination, these particular switches or the network where it is following, it is going through, need to know that where it has to be delivered. So there must be a destination address, there must be a source address. They are the global addresses, right? Wherever, in which network they are traveling. So that it should have. a global address. A local address, also a packet should have when it is traveling, is what is called as the hop address. Hop address means here the packet moves from here to here. So when it is moving from here to here, it will carry the local address. So once it comes over here, then when it is jumping to the next hop, the address changes, right? Like hop to hop addresses, it will be embedded into the packet and moves with a local address until it reaches the destination. That is what we call it as a local address. And the local address in the virtual circuit network topology is called as VCI, Virtual Circuit Identifier. How it is, let us see here in this particular diagram. You see that this is a switch. Now the packet is coming from a previous, maybe a switch, maybe a source. Now the packet is coming. This packet has got a header, but here in this header, we don't have that global address. Now what is incorporated, because now the communication is happening in the data link layer. There is a 8-bit address here, which is called as a VCA, the Virtual Circuit Identifier. This is the address, right? With this address, it comes to this switch. But when it is moving in the output link, you see that the VCA is changed, right? That's why we call this VCA as local addresses. It's only local to that particular link or the network, right? So that how it is being managed by the network, let us see. And here also, as you have seen, in the circuit network, naturally there must be 3 phases. One is the connection setup phase, and second one is the data transfer phase, and the third one is the teardown phase. And you see that what is happening in the data transfer phase. In the data transfer phase, the packets are coming. It is having the load as payload as a data. And as you've seen in the previous definition of the virtual circuit network, the message is divided into smaller data units. And each data unit is coming with this VCA as a header. But when it comes here to this particular switch, this switch should know on which output link the packet should be outward, right? How it should be put out, right? Because every switch will have the multiple ports, right? It is connected to different networks, different switches. So this packet, where it has to go, because it should know in order to reach the destination, which is the path it has to follow. So that's why every switch will retain its the table. It's called as a routing table, dedicated for the virtual circuit, and it has got 4 entries, 2 major columns and 4 the subdivided columns, right? So the first major column will have the incoming details, the port details and the VCA details. And the second major column will have where it has to be transferred, to which output link it has to be transferred. In that, once again, the sub columns are which port and which VCA should be allotted to that particular packet which is coming out of this particular port. Let's see one example. A packet coming in the port 1 is having the VCA as 14. That is already now stored over here. This switch knows as soon as a packet comes over here, it will verify in the table that whatever the packet that is received on the port 1 with VCA, okay, it has been received, it is a correct packet. Then immediately it searches to which, because it has got 2 output ports, on which port it has to be delivered. So in the table only it will now trace it. So this particular packet has to be now routed on the port 3, and then it has to be reassigned with the new VCA 22. It will reassign with the new VCA 22 and transfer it. Like this, another packet coming on the port 1 with VCA 77. When it reaches over here, the second packet is C. It will deliver on the port 2, because from its routing table, it is coming to know that it has to be sent on the port 2 with a new VCA 41. That's how the packets are being routed. They automatically follow the path and reaches the destination. That's how the data moves here, right? Here it is a situation that you see here, where the packet is coming from A to B, right? When it is coming from A to B, it is now going through 3 switches, right? So it is following 3 switches over here. And at the same time, you see here the routing table in this particular switch. The routing table in this switch is already now stored, right? That is will be done during the setup phase. Now this data that is coming with the VCA 14 will be routed to the output port 3, right? With the outward VCAS 66. When it comes over here, this particular switch now reads from its table and sees that this has to be assigned with the output VCAS 22 and routed to the output port 2. Then it comes over here. This verifies with its routing table and forwards it. And safely it has reached the destination, right? So that's how the data moves. Now let us see that how the setup. So we have seen that how correctly the data moves in a designated path without any loss from one switch to another switch in the network and to the destination. That is the data transfer phase. But who will assign these VCAs? How the VCAs are being assigned, right? That let us see here. That is what we call it as a setup phase. In the setup phase, the sender need to transfer the data to the receiver, right? So the sender sends, now converts those packets, the whole message into the data packet. Let us take an example that the packet is now coming. Now it don't know that which path this packet should take when it is going to the destination B, right? So what it does is it delivers the packet, right? Without any VCA, but it will have in its hidden header the destination address, right? The destination address says that it has to reach B, but VCA will not be embedded, right? VCA is now assigned by the data link layer in the virtual circuit network path. So the packet is coming. Now the packet comes at port 1, right? So this particular switch 1, okay, reads it, then it will store it in its packet saying that the packet has been received, which is to be routed to the B because it has got a global address. It knows that where it has to go. So the packet has come barely without a local address, but it has come with a global address. What it does is it will receive the packet and assigns a VTA to that particular packet, that is 14. That route is set up now. From A to this switch 1, the route is set up. So whatever the packets comes from this particular source to the destination, always will have the VCAS 14. First it will assign that 14. Next, it has to be sent out, right? So what it does is, it will look at which is the free path at that particular time when this particular setup is to be done. The free path is port number 3. Suppose there may be one more port, there may be one more port, but at present situation, port 3 is free. It will send it to the port 3 once again. No VCA is assigned. It will just deliver it. The switch 2 receives it, and it is now knows that it is coming from the switch 1, the incoming on the port 1. Then it will assign to that particular path as 66 as VCA, and then it has to send the packet outward, right, until it reaches the destination. So now this is filled, this is filled. It will search for which is the outward path, free. Now the outward path which is free on the path to the destination is the link 2. It will send it to the link 2. So it will record it. Now the 3 entries are being done. So one is the packet received from port 1, and that is assigned a VCA 66. Then it is routed to the port 2. So this is also recorded. But the outward VCA is not still recorded. It will just send it. Now the 3 entries are being done. Similarly, it will go here. Once again, the 3 entries being are done, and then it reaches the destination. When the packet reaches the destination, this particular destination receives the packet and assigns to this particular path as a VCA 77. Now, one path is over, A to B, a request path. Now that is clear, path is established. But the source should know, before it sends the data, it should know the B has accepted my request. So what it does is, the next is it sends the acknowledgement. B starts sending the acknowledgement. When B starts sending the acknowledgement, already the path from A to B, when it is coming through the port 3, is having VCA, right? Now what it does is, in the acknowledgement, B starts sending in its header the VCA name as 77. You see that in the previous case, when the path is getting established, when A is routing a packet, it is coming out without VCAs. VCA is allotted in the phase manner. But now, already the VCA is assigned for the path like this, so that in the return path, this B assigns 77 in the acknowledgement header and route it. As soon as it receives a packet at port number 3, this was blank, previously when was the setup request was happening. Then it understands that this particular VCA, the port 3 VCA, should have 77. It will record it and then route it to here. So when it is routed to here, it knows that when that is sent on the port 2, VCA should be 22 because it is already recorded during the request phase. So it is assigned once again to the acknowledgement packet 22 as a VCA. Send it here. It will come to this particular table. When it comes to this particular table now, it receives a packet with the 22 here on the port 2. Then it has to send the acknowledgement in the next link, right? When it is sending on the next link, the port 1, it will remove the 22 and put 62 because that is already done, and send the acknowledgement. When it is received over here, it will fill this particular blank space, then change this VCA to 14 and delivers it. Now A receives the acknowledgement. A comes to know that, okay, the connection is established because B has acknowledged. The next phase is it has to send the data, right? When it is sending the data, already it knows that whenever it is sending the data, now the next arriving packets, data packets, always should have the VCA as 14. It will put that particular data header as a VCA as 14 and then route the packet. That's what you are seeing. So in the connection, one thing that I will once again go back and review, during the connection setup phase, a request packet will not have any VCA. In the en route, the VCAs are being assigned by the particular switches to that particular path. Now, when the acknowledgement is coming, the return paths VCAs will be transferred one by one by the acknowledgement and the path get established. You know that now the path is ready and the tables are filled in the intermediate switches. So once that is done, you know that the data transfer automatically takes place, right? So the packets will come because this knows that whatever the packet now it is delivering, so it has to be delivered with the VCA as 14, it delivers it automatically. How many packets moves from A to B? They always carry with the port address as 1, the here, and the VCA as 14. Always it will follow this path because it's already established, right? So a packet coming from A always will have the VCA as input VCA as 14, output VCA as 66. It goes to the switch 2 only. From switch 2, it will go to the switch 3 only. And then it goes on until the last packet is sent from A, right? Once the last packet delivers from A, so A tears off, right? So that is called as a tear down phase. So once the source A completes the transfer, right? So A requests for the tearing off. Once that request goes over there, the B responds and tear down. Once that the tear down happens, the sources which are allotted, means this entry in the tables, they will be removed, right? That connection goes off. And this particular connection, that's what we call it as, is a virtual path, right? Here, the path established is virtual. It is not permanent, right? So it is only for that particular path, the data to move from A to B, it is established, and then it will be released. The resources will be released back. So that is the advantage, right? And look at the efficiency now. What is the efficiency? The delay encountered by each packet remains same because all of them follow the same path, right? The link delay remains same, right? But that's what we have seen over here, right? And the one advantage that we see here is the virtual circuits, they have got the resource allocation is on demand only depending upon the demand, the resources are allocated and then they automatically will be released back. Okay. And the delay calculation, if you come to that, it will be little bit different when compared to your circuit switching, right? So here, the delay in the switches is not there. Previously, the delay was there, right? But here the delay is not there. So initially, this is the setup phases, and setup and teardown phases, they will have the delays. But when the packet is moving, it is not delayed in the switch, right? So immediately as soon as the last bit is received in this particular switch, the data start moving outwards, and then it will go to that. This is with respect to a particular small packet, right? Similarly, the other packets will have the other delays, right? And look at that, how the calculation is being done here, right? So the total delay is now the transmission delay, right, of the packet. This is one transmission delay, the second transmission delay, and the third transmission delay, 3t plus the 3 tau, right? So the tau is the propagation time. Propagation time means the time taken by the bit to move from here to here, right? So transmission time is the total time taken by the packet to move from source to the destination. That is capital T. But the propagation time means the transfer time. So the bit that is released, it takes how much time to reach over here. That is called as the transmission time and the propagation time. So that is also, it has to go through the 3 paths over here, so 3t. But the additionally, we have got setup delay and the teardown delays. They are being incorporated. So it is a little faster than your circuit switching network, right? This is how that virtual circuit network. So the comparison you have seen, circuit switch, then the packet switching, we got 2 category, datagram and the virtual circuit network, right? And this portion is completed for you, right? So I had to move on to module 4, right? So I think all these portions are covered. Is it not, students? Yeah. So let us go to the module 4. In the module 4, so you have seen here the different category of data transfer, right? So that is what you have seen, the media access control protocols. In the media access control protocol, this operates in the data link layer. In the data link layer, one very familiar and the known protocol that was being used is a multiple access resolution protocol, right? In the multiple resolution access protocol, it is normally used in the eventuality of when the data has to be transferred, when there are multiple stations, and each station will not have any control over the other station. Understand? So this particular media access control access transfer the data between source to the destination is happening when each node is independent. Each station is independent. You don't know what is the other station is doing. So when such is the situation, each one can send the data. It is something like that. There are 60 students. And you can take this example only, right? Our Zoom class. I think if all your microphones are enabled, each one of you don't know, right? If I allow you all of to speak, all of you start speaking together at different times, there will be overlap. Nobody will be hearing who is speaking what. That situation also we come across in the networks, in the stations, right? How to solve the situation in those cases? Because this is the type of the networks sometimes we need to employ, right? in some situation it is essentially required, right? There are multiple stations. Each station don't know. They will not have any controller, no monitoring station, no control station to say that who should be first, who should be second, who should be denied, who should not be denied. No control. Everybody is independent. In that case, some protocol has to be designed, right? So they are designed different protocols. They are categorized into three major categories you have seen, right? So random access protocol. Now, I think Madam started with the random access protocol. In the random access protocol, you have gone through Aloha. So in the Aloha, once again, each station is independent. These are the stations that you have seen. There are 4 stations. 4 stations are independent to each other. They have got frames. The frames they deliver independently. Now look at that situation. Independently deliver the frames, but the channel is same, right? They are sharing the same channel. Now this is the situation where there are multiple stations. The channel is shared. When the channel is shared, there are chances that the packets collide, right? The chances of collision of the packets is very, very high, right? That's why you have seen here, it is in this particular random access Aloha, your throughput is only 13%, 18.4%. That's what you have seen. Means out of 100 packets delivered by a station, there are chances that only 18.4 packets reaches the destination. To solve that problem of that Aloha, pure Aloha, they thought that how to solve this particular problem, right? So some progress in the invention, they thought that why can't we adopt the slotted Aloha? Slotted Aloha in the sense, a slot is fixed, right? Means each station is given an instruction that when they are releasing the packets, the packet length should remain same, right? The number of bits in the packet should remain the same. That is one assumption all should follow. The second assumption is the speed of delivery, the rate in which they are delivering the packet should remain same, right? So the rate of delivery should, if it remains same, then the frame time remains same. Suppose the frame time is taken as 1 millisecond, all will deliver the packet with a frame time of 1 millisecond, and all will deliver the packet with a frame size as either 1 KB or 2 KB. So that is what is the understanding that will be reached out between all the stations in the case of the slotted Aloha. And all are now asked to start with one stopwatch, right? They start with t is equal to 0. For example, they will be given instruction that they should take the reference time as one particular time, 12 o'clock morning, right? 12 a.m. should be taken as a reference. Now they have to release their packets. If they are ready with the packets, they should release the packet starting time as t is equal to 0. At every 1 millisecond, they are allowed to release a packet, not in between. You look at in the previous case, pre-Aloha, whenever you are ready, you should release a packet, right? Randomly. But here, everybody is now given a start time. From that start time, they are given a slot that every 1 millisecond or whatever that is agreed upon. Maybe 2 millisecond slot time, maybe 3 millisecond slot time. That was agreed upon. Based on the agreed upon slot time, they are supposed to release a packet. Look at here. In the station 1, he is ready with a packet. It starts with t is equal to 0. And at that particular time, no other station has got any other packet. It has released the packet. Suppose at that same time, if station 2 has got a packet, since it is a starting time, if it is ready with a packet, it can release the packet. Because they don't know, 1 is sending, 2 will not know that 1 is sending the packet. So look at here, that is what? Here, when 1 is sending the packet, no others is sending the packet, no collision is happening. But here, 2 stations simultaneously release the packet, there is a collision. So here also the collision is also available, will be there. There are chances of collision. So, but not as bad as pure Aloha, right? Because they were releasing the packets randomly. So the efficiency, the percentage of success was 18.4%. But in the slotted Aloha, in the slot is being given Suppose at t is equal to 0, this releases the packet, and the slot is taken as 1 millisecond. At 0.5 millisecond, station 2 has got a packet, but it cannot release. It has to wait for the slot duration of 1 millisecond. After that only it has to release a packet. Now this is one a sort of discipline, a small discipline is given, right? But even then it suffers from collision, you have seen, and here the success, that it is a throughput, is 36% now, 36.8%, little better, right? Somewhat little better, means out of 100 packets, only 36.8 packets has got the success rate. Still, there is a problem. The engineers are who are involving this particular multiple access control protocols. They keep on doing inventions, right? So why can't some other more efficient way could be identified, right? So that is the next protocol that we are seeing is carrier sense multiple access, another protocol. It may be a little better than the previous two. You see that one of the protocol, the next protocol what you are studying is little better than the previous one. Pure-Aloha was 18.4% success rate. The slotted Aloha is 36.8. This may be much better. Okay, so let us see in the problems that how much better it has got a throughput. This is called as a carrier sense multiple access, right? Carrier sense multiple access in the sense that it is something like that. I told you we are all meeting in the Zoom class. When all of you are allowed to talk, right? So irrespective of whether others starts talking or whether other is speaking, you will start or whatever. If all of you start talking together, then there is a chance of collision. Nobody hears what others are speaking. Then let us come to a discipline. What is the discipline? If one starts speaking, the others has to wait until he completes. You know, the collision will not be there. Now I am speaking. All of you are silent, you know. When I allow you to speak, you will speak. So that means what you are doing is you are hearing me until I stop. Once, if I stop, you will come to know that the channel is free, you can speak, right? This is called as a carrier sense. Means you are all hearing me. Similarly here, all the participating stations, here the example given is the station A, B, C, and D. All are participating stations. They are sharing the same channel, but they have to send the data. But when they are sending the data, what they do is they sense before transmit or listen before talk. Means first they are good listeners, right? Previous two protocols, they were not listeners. They were simply sending the data irrespective of what other person does, right? Here all are disciplined people. They are listening. They are the listeners, right? So look at here a situation in the diagram. B wants to send the data. Now let me see this particular situation. B wants to send the data. This is the channel now. It will listen to the channel. Now the channel is free. No data is there, right? Until this particular time T1. So then B thinks that the channel is free. It releases the data. This is the data, first bit. And the first bit now goes, it travels. Now that's what we call it as a transmission time. The bit is traveling now. It travels in the channel. It takes some time to reach A. That's what we call it as a propagation time, right? At the same time, you see it is also traveling in the channel to reach C. It reaches C at this particular time. It reaches D at this particular time. It is traveling. Now look at here a situation. Let me take the time, this particular time, right? Where my mouse is placed, right? The marker is placed. At this particular time, now B has released the packet. The first bit is traveling here. At this particular time, A likes to listen to the network. If it listens to the network, look at in this particular place duration, the channel is free. It finds that the channel is free, but actually B has released the data. But when A senses the channel, it finds that the channel is free because the packet, the bit has not reached here. Similarly, C will also be listening, but B has released the data bit. When the C listens at this particular time or this particular time, it comes to know that it is free. That is the problem in this particular carrier sense multiple access. So the data from B is now traveling in the channel, but at this particular time T2, C has got a data to send. It listens to the channel this particular time, but it finds that the data is not there because at time T2, where is the data sent by B? It is somewhere here, right? It is somewhere here. The C is not able to sense. There is already the data released by B. So it starts releasing the data, right? Understand? Now, C starts releasing the data. Its first bit is traveling now. It starts traveling to the left side as well as to the right side. Now, the problem is both of them will collide at this particular point, right? And they don't know the collision has occurred. They have released their data, the whole packet. You look at the length, the packet released by B. This is what is now shown in the yellow is all the bits released by B in the particular packet. Here also you see that what you see in the blue is the bits released by B. The packets released by C will be traveling like this in all the direction, and the data released by B is moving in all this direction. But now at this particular time, the collision has occurred. Both their data has collided, and then the black portion you see that is a collision, right? The lost data of both C and B. So here that means they have found out a solution that you be a good listener, listen till the channel is free. Then if you are ready with the data, release the data. They have come to a particular understanding. A protocol has been released. But even this carrier sense multiple access protocol suffers some disadvantage. This is the disadvantage, right? So if during the transmission time of the data released by B, if any other station is ready with the data, and if it comes to know that the channel is free, it also releases its data, and at that particular time, there will be a collision. But look at the situation now. Suppose C is not ready with the data, but D is also not ready with the data, E is also not ready with the data. But when the first bit of B reaches C, then C comes to know that there is a data, channel is occupied. Suppose if C would have been tested its channel at this particular time, probably this collision would not have happened, because C will come to know that the packets of B is coming. Now it will deter, it will withdraw. So that without any collision, the data released by B would have reached A also, would have reached C also, would have reached D also, right? That is the advantage they have pursued, right? So within the propagation time, if nobody releases the data, then there is chances that the packet will completely delivered without any collision to the destination. Now that is what they thought and released the CSMA, right? And this particular, then what is the vulnerable time? Vulnerable time is nothing but the propagation time, right? In this propagation time, right, the propagation time means the time taken by the first bit released by B to reach the other station. That is the vulnerable time. Within that particular time, if any other station release the packet, then the collision will occur. But after the propagation time, if any other station try to sense that channel, the data has already reached that, so they will not try to release the packet, so the collision will not happen. So the vulnerable time now here it is reduced to the propagation time. Previously you see that it was a slot duration was a vulnerable time, but here it is still much reduced to the propagation time. That is the advantage of the CSMA, right? And in the CSMA, since there is a collision that is happening, then they thought that there must be some more thing to be added to this protocol, right? What is added to the protocol is they added the three other the sub protocols added to the CSMA is let the CSMA works with the three additional supporting sub protocols. They are called as a persistence method. So I incorporated the CSMA is incorporated with persistence methods. So what are the persistence methods? There are three persistence methods: one persistence and P persistence, non-persistence, right? Let us see what is that these protocols incorporated by CSMA so that the efficiency is much better improved than compared to all the previous methods. So that means we saw CSMA. CSMA also suffers some disadvantages. To eliminate those disadvantages, they incorporated persistence methods. There are three types of persistence method: one persistence, non-persistence, and P persistence. What is P1 persistence? One persistence means it is persistence, you know, right? What you say in Kannada, you know, it is Bembidada Bhuta, right? That means you wait. Like if you want to meet principal, you will go to his chamber. You want the work to be done, right? What you will do? If it is 1 hour, no problem. If it is 10 minutes, no problem. You will wait, right? So that is called as a persistence. Means you will not give up. You will wait until you meet principal. Similarly here also, if a station is ready to send the data, for example, let me see the previous case only. Now B has released the data. Let me assume that the C is also having a data. It waits. It will come to know at this particular time that B has released a packet. What it does is it starts sensing the channel till the last bit of B reaches. Means the complete packet released by B reaches the destination, right? It waits, keep on checking the channel. If the channel is having some data, somebody is sending it, it keeps on sensing the channel and waits. That is called as a persistence, right? Look at here. Now, C wants to send the data. Already B has sent the data. C starts sensing the channel that either the channel is free. That is what is called as a continuous sense. You see that it is checking the channel. Is it free? Is it free? Is it free? Every time it gets a message that it is busy. The channel is busy. It waits. And as soon as the last bit of B is reached, B stops. When B stops, the channel becomes free, right? As soon as the channel becomes free, what it does? Immediately it will start transmitting. It is similar to that. You wait for the principal. As soon as somebody says that, okay, you can go and meet the principal, you immediately rush, right? Without wasting a single time. That is called as one persistence. Now this is incorporated here to better the efficiency, right? So one persistence means 100% persistence. You will not give up, you will wait. And this particular operation is explained in the type of a flow chart. You see that now C senses the channel. If the channel is busy, it goes back and waits there only. Now that protocol will be running continuously, checking the channel, waiting, checking the channel. Once if the channel becomes idle, it starts transmitting, right? That is your one persistence protocol. Let us see that non-persistence. Non-persistence means it is something like that you don't have a patience, right? You want to meet principal, you will go. They say principal is busy. You will not wait, you will go out. You will come back at random time, right? After 10 minutes, you may come back. Then once again, you will check. They say principal is busy, you will go back. Then you may come back after 20 minutes. It's a random waiting time. Similarly here also, the station when it is ready to send the data, it checks the channel is busy, right? That is called as carrier sense. So it is sensing the channel for the data is there already by somebody. So it waits this slot time, right? Then once again it senses the channel is busy. Now it waits for another time. You see, the time slot of waiting is different. Here it may be around 1 millisecond, here it is 2 milliseconds. A random time it waits, senses. Suppose at this time, if the channel is busy, it waits. Like this, the waiting time goes on. But as soon as now in the next slot, it senses the channel and the channel is free, it sends the data. Okay, this is called as a non-persistence, and it betters the performance in a different way, because you are tossing on a probability, right? Random waiting time, checking the channel, and then if it is free, you will get an access, right? So that is what is explained in the form of a block diagram. Here you look at here, right? The flow, the station C checks the channel, it is busy, it doesn't wait permanently, it waits for random time, comes back. In this random time, it may do its own other job, right? It will come back, sense the channel. If the channel is once again busy, it will wait a different time now. It may be 3 milliseconds now, goes back. The next, if it is busy, it may wait for 1 millisecond or it may be 10 milliseconds. It is not progressively increasing waiting time. It is a random wait time, right? So don't think that if this is 1 millisecond, if this is 10 millisecond, next should be 30 milliseconds. No, it may be 1 millisecond. It's a random wait time. Now the random generation, it will have a random probability generation technique. Based on that, it will wait. But when it comes to know that the channel is free, it starts sending the data, right? That is what is called as the non-persistence. P-persistence, it is once again, as you have seen in the virtual circuit network, it's a amalgamation of circuit switch and datagram. Similarly here, P-persistence is an amalgamation, or it takes the better properties of both persistence and non-persistence, right? So that's why we call it as a P-persistence. P-persistence means the probability that the station sends the data if it comes to that the channel is free, and the probability that it differs, right? That depends upon the P that it adopts, randomly it adopts. For example, if P is 0.6, then we can say 60% if it finds, means you can expect. No, it is similar to that. How do you expect? How do you think of your friend, right? When some other friends say that, is it X is coming, you will answer, he may come, he may not come. The probability of how much he comes, 80% he may come, 20% probably he may not come. That is what is called as the persistence method, right? So the probability is once again generated by the station itself. This P, what the station takes, it is known its choice. It may take P as 80%, it may take as P as 20%. Based on that, it will try to send the data. Now look at here, how this particular P persistence works. Now, it is a amalgamation of both one persistence and non-persistence, Now, in the beginning, it adopts one persistence method. It keeps on waiting for the channel to be free. So it is one persistence now. It waits. But once the channel is free, you have seen in the previous one persistence, immediately it starts sending the data. But here in the case of P persistence, even though it finds that the channel is free, it will not, because the probability now, right? So probability outcome is it will not send, right? It will introduce what is called as a time slot equal to the frame time, right? The frame time slot it will introduce means it takes one more additional chance. Why I should be in trouble, right? It is something like that when all of you ask to speak. Now you keep mum, for a while. Let me see whether the other person is speaking or not. Similarly here, it adopts that particular method. Wait, let me wait. Why I should be hurry? Why I should be the first person? So it waits. Then after that one slot, there is no guarantee that it will send the data. It may add another, that depends upon the probability that it has adopted, right? So it may wait for another slot also. It may wait for the third slot also. And waiting depends upon what probability that it has generated, how many slots it has to wait, right? So now in this particular case, it is waiting for 3 slot times. Then after third slot also, it is ensuring that, okay, nobody is now transmitting the data. I'm sure that the channel is free. Let me send the data, right? It will send the data now. Sometimes this slot may be 1 slot, or it may be 5 slots or 10 slot, right? So this is what is the P persistent. So P persistence in the sense, it waits for the channel to be free. Once it is free, when it has to send the data, it will incorporate the probability, right? P is the probability it will send the data. Q is the probability that it may not send the data and waits and introduces the time slots. But these time slots are not random as you've seen in the previous case. They are equal to the frame time, right? Frame time slots, it will wait and send it. And that is neatly explained here in the diagram, right? The flow diagram. The channel, this is the channel C. B is already sent the data. It waits for the channel. It sends that the channel is occupied. It waits. It waits. It is 1 persistence. But once it comes to know that the channel is idle, it will not send the data. It will introduce the probability outcome P, right? In the probability outcome P, it will wait for the slot, introduce a slot, and then once again that checks the channel. If the channel is once again idle, it will not release the data. You see, it will not release the data. It will go back. Wait for another slot. Wait for this slots depends upon the P here. How many slots it will wait for the P. Suppose now take a situation here. Already, since it is waiting, some other person also will be checking for the channel, right? Whether it is free or not. In this duration, the other one releases the data. When another one releases the data, the channel is occupied. So now we see now. Here at this particular slotted wait time, if it comes to know that the channel is busy, here the channel was free, but it didn't do. It went for the next slot. In the next slot, it comes to know that the channel is busy. Then it understands that there may be a problem. The collision might have occurred. It will use a back-off process, right? Means in any these particular waiting times, if it comes to know that the channel is once again occupied, it will never wait. It will come out and goes to that back-off process. The back-off process is similar to what you have seen in the Aloha. Aloha, you have seen, right? So the back-off process is, it once again introduces what is called as, it takes the k as equal to 0, right? Then calculate that exponential waiting time. The same, what you have seen, the process will be incorporated, right? It will invoke this particular back-off process, right? So it generates a random time R between 0 to 2 to the power of k, wait for that particular time and senses the channel, right? 3 things are added here. This is all of you remember in the P persistence. So first, it incorporates 1 persistence, wait for the channel. Then if the channel is idle, it now thinks of the probability P times to whether to send the data or not, introduce the slots. During this idle time, if it once again after several time slots, if it comes to the channel is busy, it will go back to the back-off process. Means it will invoke that particular process of generating the random number R, calculate the waiting time, then wait a random time, then come back, senses the channel. Like that, it will do all these things. All these processes are being incorporated here when the stations are independent to transfer the data irrespective of the other and where there are no controllers. One after the other, gives you much better efficiency than the previous systems. Okay, now it is the time 10 o'clock. Now it is open for discussion. I'll stop now. Any other questions anybody has got?